You won't believe what happened at our baby shower, right in our own backyard. My wife, 8 months pregnant, was glowing with happiness, surrounded by friends, family, laughter, and love, completely unaware that disaster was about to strike. Out of nowhere, a HOA Karen Weed had minor run-ins with before stormed in, her face twisted with rage. She pointed at my wife and shouted something that made my blood run cold. "You look like a thief." I thought she was joking at first, but then, before anyone could react, she pulled out a gun and fired a shot. The sound ripped through the air, sending our guests screaming, children crying, and my heart racing. In that moment, everything we were celebrating, our new life, our joy, our family, felt like it was about to be destroyed. And what she said next will shock you even more. Asterisk, before we dive into this unbelievable story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, because I want to see where everyone is tuning in from. It's crazy to think that something like this can happen anywhere, in any city, right in what's supposed to be the safety of your own neighborhood. Now, before the story really kicks off, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because stories like this, shocking, emotional, and completely unpredictable, happen more often than you think, and you don't want to miss a single one. All right, let's set the scene. My wife and I had been counting down the days to her baby shower. She was 8 months pregnant, glowing, and so excited to celebrate with our friends and family. We had decorated the backyard with balloons, banners, and little baby-themed decorations. Everything was perfect, the smell of cake in the air, the sound of laughter, the sun shining down. It was exactly the kind of joyful day we had been dreaming of, but there was something we didn't expect. Our neighborhood has a strict HOA, and there's one particular member we've always had awkward encounters with. Let's just call her Karen. She had a reputation for being controlling, nosy, and just unpleasant. We thought we'd finally escaped her attention on this special day. We were so wrong, because what happened next completely shattered the calm, turning our celebration into a nightmare we will never forget. Asterisk, the day of our baby shower started like any other warm Saturday morning in our quiet suburban neighborhood. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden glow over the streets lined with perfectly trimmed lawns and white picket fences. The birds chirped as if they knew we were celebrating something special. My wife, Emily, was already bustling around the backyard, carefully placing tiny pink and blue baby decorations on the tables we had rented for the day. She was radiant. Her round belly glowed in the sunlight, and her smile was contagious. I watched her from the porch, my heart swelling with a mix of love, pride, and nervous excitement. Today wasn't just about celebrating our baby. It was about celebrating life, family, and the love we had built together. We had spent weeks planning this day. Every detail mattered. The flowers in mason jars, the hand-painted banners, the pastel balloons, and even the cake, which my mother had baked with meticulous care. Friends and family were slowly starting to arrive, carrying gifts wrapped in soft-colored paper and little bows. There was laughter already bubbling in the air, the sound of children running around, and the scent of freshly cut grass mingling with the aroma of homemade treats. Everything felt perfect, like a scene out of one of those feel-good movies you see online. But even as the day seemed idyllic, a subtle tension hung in the air. Our neighborhood, as lovely as it appeared, was notorious for its strict HOA rules. Lawn heights, fence colors, even the shade of holiday decorations were scrutinized. Most of the time, it was just a minor inconvenience, the kind of thing you rolled your eyes at and moved on. But then there was Karen, the kind of HOA member everyone dreaded. She had that sharp, piercing look, like she could see every flaw in your life without even trying. We had clashed a few times in the past over lawn ornaments, parking spots, and one unforgettable incident where she accused us of leaving trash out too long, even though we hadn't. She had a way of making small issues feel like criminal offenses. As I watched Emily laugh with her friends, I noticed a figure across the street. Karen, standing there, hands on her hips, scanning our yard with that signature glare. I felt a pang of unease. Why was she here today? We hadn't sent her an invite. Could she really have the audacity to confront us during the baby shower? I try to brush it off. Maybe she was just taking a walk. Maybe it was coincidence. But deep down, my stomach tightened, and I had the first inkling that today would not go as planned. The guests were arriving in waves now. My sister brought her 2 kids, who immediately ran to chase each other around the yard, squealing with delight. My parents, excited and emotional, were helping set up the gifts table. Emily's best friends, a tight-knit group who had been with her through thick and thin, started playing music and organizing games. The air was filled with joy, the kind that makes you forget the outside world. And yet, with each glance I stole toward Karen, that joy was punctuated with a sharp note of anxiety. I remembered thinking how strange it was, how one person's presence could cast such a shadow over a day meant for celebration. But I convinced myself it was nothing, just paranoia. After all, Emily was smiling. She had her family and friends around her, and we were careful, organized, and prepared. Nothing could ruin this day. Nothing, that is, except what was coming. As I helped Emily with the final touches, arranging cupcakes on the dessert table and tying ribbons to chairs, Karen took a step closer. I noticed her lips moving, though I couldn't hear her words from this distance. Her face was fixed in that look of judgment, the kind that made you feel like she was scanning every detail for fault. My unease grew, but I focused on Emily, hoping she wouldn't notice, hoping that this day could remain untouched by the outside world. The first hint that things were about to go wrong came when one of the neighbors walked by and whispered to me, "Isn't that Karen? What's she doing here?" My heart skipped a beat. A few minutes later, I saw her approach the yard, crossing the street with purpose. She wasn't strolling casually, she had a mission. My friends noticed her too, and exchanged uneasy glances. Something in the air shifted. The laughter dimmed, just slightly, replaced by a sense of tension that no one wanted to acknowledge out loud. Emily, still radiant and unaware, laughed at a joke my brother made and took a sip of her lemonade. I reached out and held her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Everything's fine," I whispered, though my voice lacked conviction. I wanted to believe it myself. But Karen was now just steps away from the yard, and I could see the tight curl of her lips, the narrowed eyes that seemed to see straight through us. The backyard, which had felt like a safe haven moments ago, suddenly seemed smaller, more claustrophobic. The decorations, the carefully laid tables, the soft music, all of it felt fragile, like a beautiful glass ornament waiting to shatter. Guests were starting to notice her too. Conversations paused, smiles faltered, and the children slowed their running, sensing that the energy had changed. My stomach twisted. Something was about to happen. I didn't know what, but I knew, instinctively, that it wouldn't be minor. And just like that, the scene was set. The perfect day, the joyful celebration, the anticipation of welcoming our baby, all hanging by a thread. The storm had arrived in the form of a single person standing in our neighborhood, her eyes locked on my wife. Little did we know, in just moments, our lives would be turned upside down, and a single word from Karen would ignite a chain of events no one could have imagined. I could feel my pulse quicken as Karen stepped onto our lawn, her eyes scanning every detail like a hawk. My friends and family had started to notice her too, but no one spoke up, not yet. There was a moment, just a heartbeat, when the backyard seemed frozen. Emily, still smiling and unaware, was adjusting a balloon on the dessert table when she finally noticed the movement at the edge of the yard. Her smile faltered. "Honey, who is that?" she whispered, her voice tinged with confusion. I swallowed hard. "It's just a neighbor," I said, trying to keep my tone casual, though my hands were trembling slightly. "Probably just walking by." But I knew better. Karen wasn't just walking by. She never was. Her eyes locked on Emily, and then the words came, sharp and venomous, slicing through the laughter and music like a knife. You look like a thief." The backyard fell silent. Children stopped mid-run, balloons swayed gently in a breeze, and a neighbor let out an involuntary gasp. Emily froze, her hands instinctively clutching her belly. I could see the shock ripple across her face. I rushed toward her, my heart hammering in my chest. "Emily, it's okay, ignore her," I whispered, trying to shield her from Karen's venom. But Karen wasn't backing down. She stepped closer, her voice rising with fury. I know what you're up to. You're stealing from this neighborhood, and I won't let it happen. My friends started murmuring among themselves. Some were confused, others angry, and a few tried to interject, telling her to leave. But she waved them off, her glare sharper than ever. Stay out of this, she snapped, pointing directly at me. This is between her and me. Emily, trembling, tried to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't understand. I haven't taken anything, but Karen wasn't listening. She wasn't here to listen. She was here to dominate, to humiliate, and perhaps, deep down, to instill fear. I took a step closer to Emily, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. You need to leave now, I said, trying to keep my voice firm despite the adrenaline coursing through me, before this gets out of hand. But Karen's expression twisted, almost gleeful, as if she thrived on the chaos she was creating. You think you can hide behind your little celebration and your friends? She spat. I see everything. I know who you are. Her hands were shaking now, but not from fear, from fury. She was the storm, and we were caught in its eye. The first hint that this confrontation could turn dangerous came when she reached into her bag. I froze. Something metallic glinted in the sunlight, and my stomach dropped. My mind raced. Could it be what I thought it was? No, not here. Not now. Not at a baby shower. But yes, it was a gun. A small, compact pistol clutched tightly in her hand. My heart leapt into my throat. Karen, put that down. I shouted, my voice echoing through the backyard. My friends stepped back, fear evident on their faces. Children began to cry, and Emily buried her face into my chest, sobbing. Karen's lips curled into a smirk. I'm not afraid of you, she said, her voice eerily calm despite the chaos around her. No one should be safe when criminals are in our neighborhood. She waved the gun slightly, more as a threat than an immediate action, but the danger was real. Everyone knew it. I tried reasoning with her. This is a baby shower. There's no crime here. Please, put down and leave. But she was beyond reason. Her anger wasn't about logic. It was about control, domination, and some twisted sense of justice only she understood. Then, as if to prove her point, she fired a shot just over our heads. The sound ripped through the air, deafening in its intensity. Screams erupted. Children ran to their parents, some slipping and falling in the panic. Friends grabbed whatever they could to shield themselves. Emily collapsed to the ground, sobbing, and I pulled her close, trying to keep her safe. My heart was racing uncontrollably. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The backyard, once a place of joy and celebration, had turned into a war zone. Balloons swayed eerily, and a cupcake toppled from the table, its frosting smeared across the grass. Karen stood there, shaking but resolute, eyes wild and unblinking. I realized in that instant that the woman we had dealt with before was not the same. This was someone who had crossed a line we didn't even know existed. Neighbors started to call 911, their voices trembling, urgent. Karen's smirk faltered slightly, her attention divided between us and the sounds of approaching sirens. But she wasn't done. I will protect this neighborhood, she shouted, her voice carrying over the chaos. I will make sure criminals pay. I moved closer to Emily, whispering urgently, it's going to be okay. Just stay down. Don't move. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, but I had to stay calm. For her. For the baby. The seconds stretched into eternity. Every small noise, the siren, a car door slamming, the gasp of a neighbor, felt amplified. Karen's grip on the gun was firm, her body tense, like a predator refusing to back down. And then, the twist I hadn't expected. She pointed directly at Emily's gift table, as if accusing the innocent decorations and gifts of some terrible crime. All of this is mine, she screamed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was madness. Total, incomprehensible madness. Guests were screaming, running for cover, trying to make sense of the chaos, while Emily whimpered against my chest. And yet, Karen seemed to thrive in the panic she had caused. For those few moments, it felt like the world had narrowed down to the three of us, me, Emily, and Karen, in a dangerous, unpredictable triangle. The joy of the baby shower, the laughter, the anticipation, all replaced by fear, disbelief, and the primal instinct to protect. And in that suspended moment, I knew, whatever happened next, our lives would never be the same. Karen had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, and there was no going back to the peaceful life we had known. The backyard erupted into chaos. Karen's gun glinted in the sunlight, shaking slightly in her hand, and every heartbeat felt deafening. I could hear the screams of our friends and family, the terrified cries of children, and the high-pitched wails of Emily as she pressed herself against me. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching longer than the last, as if the universe itself had paused to watch this nightmare unfold. "Stay down," I shouted, grabbing Emily and pulling her behind the dessert table. The wooden surface offered little protection, but it was the only cover we could find. Guests scrambled for anything solid, tables, chairs, even planters, while others yelled at Karen to put the gun down. But she wasn't listening. She was in her own world, consumed by some dangerous, distorted sense of justice. Then it happened. The sharp crack of the gun firing tore through the air. The bullet didn't hit anyone, but it struck the fence just behind Emily's head. The sound echoed like a thunderclap, vibrating through the yard and into our very bones. I felt my stomach drop and my heart slam against my chest. My instincts screamed at me to act, but for a moment I was paralyzed, watching my wife, so pregnant and vulnerable, crouch beside me, her face pale and terrified. People screamed, ducked, and scattered. My brother tried to grab Karen's arm, but she twisted away, almost as if she had been expecting resistance. The gun shook violently in her hand, her finger trembling over the trigger. "You can't hide from me," she shouted, voice cracking with rage. "This is my neighborhood. You don't belong here." Emily was shaking uncontrollably. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "I just wanted a baby shower. I just wanted to celebrate." My heart ached. In that instant, all the months of planning, all the joy and anticipation, felt meaningless. The only thing that mattered was keeping her and our unborn child safe. I realized I had to act. Slowly, carefully, I stood and stepped in front of Emily, trying to create a barrier between her and Karen. "This ends now," I shouted, trying to sound authoritative despite the terror clawing at my chest. "Put the gun down, Karen. You don't have to do this." For a moment, it seemed like she might listen. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, and I thought, maybe this is it, maybe she'll stop. But then, in the most surreal twist, she laughed, a chilling, high-pitched laugh that didn't belong in the middle of a sunny baby shower. "Stop me," she said. "Nobody stops me. Not you, not them, not anyone." Another shot rang out, this time bouncing off the pavement near the chairs where our friends were huddled. The sound was deafening, sending shards of fear into everyone's bones. I grabbed a nearby chair and swung it toward her, not to hit, but to distract, to break her focus. She flinched, and in that tiny fraction of a second, my brother lunged at her again, trying to wrest the gun from her hand. But Karen was strong and desperate. She yanked the gun free, pointing it wildly. Another shot cracked, this one grazing the corner of the picnic table. Cupcakes toppled, decorations tore, and the wind carried the sound of chaos down the street. Neighbors had started calling 911, and sirens wailed in the distance, a grim promise that help was on the way. In the midst of the chaos, I shielded Emily with my body, whispering reassurances, though I barely believed them myself. "It's okay, baby, it's okay. We're going to get through this." My hands were shaking violently and sweat ran down my forehead, but I had to remain calm. She needed me to be strong, to be a shield. One of our friends, a former security officer, tackled Karen to the ground. The gun skidded across the grass, and for a fleeting second, everything seemed under control. But Karen's resistance was fierce. She screamed and struggled, eyes wild, as if the world had narrowed down to just her rage and our fear. Another neighbor joined in to subdue her, and slowly, painfully, they managed to hold her down until the police arrived. When the officers finally reached the backyard, guns drawn and commands sharp, the tension was almost unbearable. Karen, still screaming and thrashing, was finally handcuffed. The adrenaline was so thick I could barely think, barely breathe. My friends helped me sit down, with Emily, who was trembling against my chest, crying softly, her face buried in my shoulder. The reality hit me like a wave. The baby shower, the celebration of life, had become a scene from a nightmare. Balloons were torn, decorations scattered, gifts trampled. Our backyard looked like a war zone. But worse than the physical destruction was the emotional one. Emily was safe, yes, but the fear etched on her face, the way her hands shook, the way she clutched her belly. It was something I would never forget. The police quickly assessed the situation, talking to neighbors and witnesses. Karen's story was already unraveling. She claimed she was protecting the neighborhood from thieves, that she had seen suspicious activity, and that our baby shower decorations were somehow part of a scheme to steal from her. It was absurd, ridiculous, and terrifying. I held Emily tightly, trying to soothe her, whispering over and over that everything would be okay. Deep down, I wasn't sure we would ever feel safe in that neighborhood again. The very place that had promised security and comfort had been infiltrated by chaos and danger, and for a moment, I feared that life would never return to normal. Yet, even amid the fear, there was a strange sense of relief. The gun was no longer pointed at anyone, Karen was restrained, and emergency services were finally on the scene. But the aftermath, the questions, the trauma, the disbelief, had only just begun. This single act of violence had changed everything, and the path ahead would be filled with twists, shock, and challenges we never imagined. And in that moment, looking at Emily's tear-streaked face, I realized one thing. No celebration, no amount of planning, could ever protect you from the unpredictability of people. The only thing you could do was hold your loved ones close, stay alert, and hope that justice, in some form, would follow. The chaos of the gunshot still reverberated in my ears as I clutched Emily close. Even though Karen was now restrained and the police were controlling the scene, the emotional fallout was only beginning. The backyard, once a celebration of life, was now a war zone. Cupcakes smashed into the grass, balloons deflated or punctured, decorations torn, and gifts scattered across the lawn. But the physical destruction was nothing compared to the emotional devastation. Emily sat trembling, her head buried in my shoulder, whispering over and over, "I just wanted a baby shower. I just wanted a happy day." Her words were so simple, so innocent, yet they cut through me like a knife. Every time I looked around at the faces of our friends and family, wide-eyed, pale, shaken, I realized how close we had come to losing control of everything. Children were being comforted by relatives, some clinging to parents for dear life, unable to comprehend the chaos they had just witnessed. The police began taking statements, their faces serious, calm, and professional, but I could see the tension in their eyes. This was not a routine call. A gun had been fired in a residential neighborhood, and the suspect, an HOA member, had targeted a heavily pregnant woman during a family celebration. One officer asked me to describe exactly what had happened, and I found myself recounting every horrifying detail, from Karen's initial accusations to the shots fired. Every word felt surreal. Karen, meanwhile, continued to shout from the back of the patrol car, claiming she was protecting the neighborhood. She insisted she had seen a thief and that she was acting in self-defense. Every time she screamed, I felt a wave of disbelief and anger. How could someone turn a joyful day into a nightmare, then have the audacity to justify it? The police were patient, but it was clear they were beginning to realize that this was not just an impulsive act. It had a disturbing level of premeditation. Neighbors had begun to gather at a safe distance, whispering among themselves. Some were shocked, some were angry, and others were curious. One neighbor muttered to another, "Can you believe she actually brought a gun to a baby shower?" I felt a chill. This incident had not only shaken us, but the entire community. What kind of neighborhood allowed someone like this to terrorize their neighbors with impunity? My parents tried to help Emily inside, offering blankets and water, but the trauma was visible. She sat quietly, clutching her belly, rocking slightly back and forth, as if the act of holding herself together was the only thing keeping her grounded. I whispered reassurances, though I felt just as unsteady. Every time I glanced at her, I relived the image of Karen pointing the gun and shouting, the sharp crack of bullets echoing in my mind. It was a moment I would never forget, a moment that replayed itself every time I closed my eyes. Friends began to comfort each other, sharing accounts of what they had seen. Some described how they had ducked, some how they had tried to intervene. But everyone agreed on one thing: it was a miracle that no one had been physically hurt. And yet, the emotional scars were immediate and undeniable. What was meant to be a joyful celebration had become a traumatic event none of us would ever forget. The HOA board was contacted soon after, and I could already feel the tension rising. Karen's actions had exposed not just her personal instability, but also a serious flaw in the HOA's ability to manage conflict. Members of the board began calling each other, whispering heatedly about liability, responsibility, and the potential consequences of letting someone like Karen remain unchecked. The thought that our community could be governed by someone so volatile sent a new wave of fear through me. The media had arrived shortly after. A local news crew had somehow caught wind of the incident, and cameras were now rolling outside our home. I saw flashes of red and blue lights reflected in the windows, capturing a scene of chaos that I didn't want to relive. Reporters were asking neighbors for statements, framing the story in ways that highlighted the terror rather than the innocence of our celebration. It was surreal, like our private nightmare had become public spectacle. Amid all this, Emily finally spoke. Her voice was soft, barely audible, but it cut through the noise. I can't believe this happened," she said. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I hugged her tighter, promising her silently that we would get through this, that we would protect her and the baby, that no one could ever make us feel this vulnerable again. The legal process had already begun. Karen had been arrested for reckless endangerment, brandishing a firearm and threatening with a deadly weapon. But there were whispers among the police and neighbors alike that this incident could escalate into more serious charges once the investigation was complete. We were now faced with a reality we hadn't anticipated, dealing with trauma, legal proceedings, and the emotional fallout of an event that should have been a joyful celebration. It wasn't just the legal aspect that weighed on us. It was the emotional toll. Every time I looked at Emily, I saw fear lingering behind her eyes. She flinched at loud noises, at shadows, even at the sound of the wind brushing through the trees. I had seen her radiant, excited, and joyful just hours earlier, and now she seemed fragile, vulnerable in ways that terrified me. The baby shower, meant to celebrate life, had been hijacked by fear and violence, leaving a mark that would take much longer to heal than the physical mess in the backyard. Even days later, the neighborhood felt different. People avoided our house, unsure how to approach us or what to say. Conversations that once revolved around mundane neighborly topics now seemed loaded with tension and fear. The HOA meetings became battlegrounds, with some members defending Karen, others condemning her actions. It was exhausting, confusing, and infuriating. The very community that was supposed to provide safety now felt like a minefield of uncertainty. Through it all, I kept thinking about the fragility of peace, the ease with which a moment of celebration could be shattered. And yet, I also realized something crucial. Despite the chaos, despite the fear, Emily and I had survived. Our friends and family had survived, and our baby, growing and healthy in Emily's womb, had survived. That realization gave me a small, flickering sense of hope amidst the horror. That even in the darkest moments, there could still be a glimmer of light. But the aftermath was far from over. Karen's story had just begun to unfold, and as we would soon learn, the twists and revelations awaiting us would shock not just our family, but the entire neighborhood. What had started as a baby shower had turned into a story of danger, betrayal, and community tension, and the real surprises were still ahead. The days after the baby shower felt surreal. Police had taken detailed statements from everyone present, collected the gun, and secured our backyard as a potential crime scene. Yet, even with the official investigation underway, the sense of unease in our neighborhood didn't dissipate. In fact, it grew. Karen's actions had opened a Pandora's box, and what we were about to uncover would shock us even more than the day itself. The police began digging into Karen's past almost immediately. Their investigation revealed a troubling pattern. Karen had a history of escalating confrontations with neighbors, some minor but others disturbing. Complaints ranged from harassing phone calls and public shouting matches to reports of trespassing accusations and threats. The officers explained to us that her behavior was not just irrational, it was consistent, obsessive, and increasingly dangerous. Our relief that she hadn't physically harmed anyone on that day was tempered by the terrifying realization that her past suggested she might have been capable of far worse. Then came the most shocking revelation. Through her HOA records and private communications, it became clear that Karen had been targeting our household long before the baby shower. She had complained to the HOA about small, trivial things, a slightly crooked mailbox, a garden gnome placed wrongly, even the timing of our trash pickup. At first, we thought it was just typical HOA nitpicking, but the investigation revealed a darker pattern. She had been cataloging our movements, monitoring our social media, and even attempting to create false complaints to isolate us within the neighborhood. I remember sitting with Emily, the two of us holding hands tightly, staring at the documents the police had shared. My mind was racing. She was planning this? I whispered. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She must have known we were vulnerable, she said softly, her voice trembling. She must have known about the baby shower. The thought that this entire event had been a calculated attack rather than a sudden outburst made my blood run cold. The police continued their investigation and interviewed several neighbors who had witnessed Karen's strange behavior in the weeks leading up to the incident. One elderly couple revealed that Karen had been photographing our backyard decorations days in advance, even asking suspicious questions about our plans under the guise of HOA guidelines. Another neighbor admitted that Karen had confronted them about our baby registry, claiming that criminals were coming into the neighborhood disguised as guests. Every revelation added another layer of horror to what we had already experienced. But the most shocking twist came when the investigators uncovered Karen's financial and personal motives. She had been involved in a series of HOA disputes that threatened her property value and standing within the community. Some of her grievances were minor, but others suggested a deep-seated paranoia and obsession with control. In a disturbing turn, police found that she had previously threatened other neighbors with legal action or violence over trivial matters, and some of those cases had been quietly settled to avoid escalation. Our family had unknowingly become her next target. Meanwhile, the HOA board was in chaos. Members were calling emergency meetings to discuss Karen's behavior, liability, and the future of the neighborhood's governance. Some members tried to defend her, insisting that she was just protective, while others demanded immediate expulsion and tighter oversight. The meeting footage later revealed heated arguments, with some members openly blaming our family for provoking her. The community division was almost as shocking as the incident itself. Amid all this, Emily and I began receiving support from friends and family, but also whispers and cold stares from neighbors who didn't know what to believe. Some people were sympathetic, others skeptical, and a few even implied that we had overreacted. It was emotionally exhausting. Every interaction, every casual glance from a neighbor felt like a test. Would they judge us, side with Karen, or simply distance themselves from the drama? Then came the revelation that completely floored us. During the police interviews, it was discovered that Karen had been involved in a lawsuit years ago against another neighbor claiming theft and property damage, accusations that were later proven false. The striking similarity between that case and our baby shower incident suggested a pattern. Karen wasn't acting out of spontaneous anger, she was following a formula, one that had been repeated over and over. She targeted families she perceived as vulnerable, created chaos, then attempted to justify her actions under the guise of protection or morality. This revelation shook me to the core. The baby shower, which had felt like an isolated nightmare, was actually part of a larger pattern of predatory behavior. My mind replayed the day again and again, the gun, the screams, Emily's terrified face, everything now reframed as part of a deliberate plan. The emotional weight was crushing. How could someone harbor such calculated malice, especially in a community that prided itself on safety and civility? Despite the fear and uncertainty, we slowly began to find strength in clarity. Knowing that Karen's actions were part of a documented pattern gave us a roadmap for protecting ourselves and ensuring justice. The police assured us that they would pursue criminal charges and work with the HOA to prevent her from harming anyone else. We started documenting every interaction with neighbors and the HOA, preparing ourselves for what could become a lengthy legal and community battle. The investigation also revealed something unexpected about our neighbors. Many had been silently observing, some too afraid to intervene in past conflicts, others unsure how to act. Yet there were a few brave individuals who had quietly supported us, confirming that while Karen's actions were monstrous, not everyone in the neighborhood condoned them. That realization offered a glimmer of hope. Even in the darkest moments, there were allies, people willing to stand for justice and decency. Finally, the police concluded their initial investigation and provided a report confirming Karen's reckless endangerment and the pattern of harassment. We learned that she could face multiple felony charges, depending on how the case proceeded. For the first time since the baby shower, I felt a cautious sense of relief. We had survived, we had evidence, and justice was a real possibility. But I also knew that the road ahead would be difficult, emotionally, legally, and socially. The neighborhood we thought we knew was forever changed. As Emily and I sat together, exhausted and emotionally drained, I realized that the baby shower, once a symbol of joy and hope, had become a turning point. We had been forced to confront danger, betrayal, and the unpredictability of human behavior. But we had also discovered resilience, courage, and the importance of standing together. And in that moment, despite the trauma, I vowed to protect our family no matter what twists and shocks lay ahead. The weeks following the investigation were a whirlwind. Karen had been formally charged with reckless endangerment, brandishing a firearm, and harassment. The legal process was just beginning, but even as the courtroom proceedings loomed, the emotional aftermath of that baby shower continued to weigh heavily on Emily and me. Every time we stepped outside, the memory of that day haunted us, the screams, the gunshot, the way the world had suddenly become unpredictable and dangerous in the place we called home. But slowly, clarity began to emerge. The police investigation, combined with the HOA documentation, confirmed what we had long suspected. Karen's actions were premeditated. She had been planning to disrupt our lives, and she had chosen the baby shower, one of the happiest moments of our lives, as her stage. The thought was chilling, but it also gave us something crucial, understanding, knowing that this was not random, not personal in the sense of us being targets out of hatred, allowed us to compartmentalize the fear and take control. We also began seeing the neighborhood differently. Some neighbors came forward privately, apologizing for not intervening sooner, admitting that they had seen Karen's strange behaviors but had feared retaliation. Others had quietly gathered evidence and supported our claims without our knowing. It was a relief to realize that while Karen had caused chaos, there were still people willing to stand on the side of justice. In that moment, I understood an important lesson. Even in communities that seem threatening or divided, there are always allies, and sometimes their support comes quietly, without fanfare. The HOA finally convened an emergency meeting to address the situation formally. There were heated debates, some board members defending Karen, while others called for her immediate expulsion. I attended alongside Emily, hoping to witness accountability and to make sure that no one else in our community would be subjected to the same terror we had endured. Standing there, watching people argue over rules and liability, I realized how fragile the sense of security in our neighborhoods can be. One person's unchecked power, combined with obsession and fear, can devastate an entire community. Yet, despite the fear, there was progress. Karen was removed from the HOA, and new policies were introduced to prevent harassment and escalation. Security measures in our neighborhood were updated, and neighbors started to talk openly about vigilance and community safety. While it was too late to erase what had happened at the baby shower, steps were being taken to ensure no one else would experience the same nightmare. Emotionally, Emily and I focused on healing. We sought therapy to process the trauma and help prepare for the baby. Emily, once visibly shaken and fearful, gradually began to smile again, though there were still moments of caution whenever she heard a loud noise or a car backfire. I stayed close, protecting her and reassuring her, understanding that healing was not linear. Each day brought small victories, a shared laugh, a peaceful moment in the backyard, a night of restful sleep. These small victories mattered more than ever before. Then came the final twist, one that no one in the neighborhood had expected. During the legal proceedings, Karen's personal history was revealed in court. Not only had she been obsessively targeting other neighbors for years, but she had also been using false claims to manipulate community perception and gain control over neighborhood property disputes. One shocking revelation came from an old HOA email where Karen had explicitly written about exposing and punishing those who threatened the community's integrity, a statement that included plans to intimidate families she deemed careless or vulnerable. The jury and the neighborhood gasped when the emails were read aloud. It became painfully clear that the baby shower incident was not just reckless, it was the culmination of years of premeditated intimidation. Despite the shock, there was a sense of closure. Justice, at least partially, had been served. Karen faced serious legal consequences. The community had policies in place to prevent such harassment in the future, and Emily and I could begin to reclaim our home as a place of safety and joy. We knew we couldn't change what had happened, but we could choose how to respond. And that decision to heal, to protect our family, and to stand strong became the most important act of all. Looking back, I realized there were several lessons we had learned through fear, chaos, and survival. First, danger can come from unexpected places, even from people we think are neighbors, friends, or part of a safe community. Second, planning, awareness, and vigilance are essential. Even when life seems perfect, circumstances can shift in an instant. Third, trauma can leave long-lasting emotional scars, but facing it together with loved ones and support networks can create resilience stronger than fear itself. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, I learned that hope exists even in the darkest moments. In the midst of the gunshots, screams, and chaos, there were friends who protected us, neighbors who quietly supported us, and police officers who took immediate action. In the aftermath, there were moments of laughter, healing, and progress. Emily's strength, our love, and the community's eventual support reminded me that even in the face of extreme adversity, courage and resilience prevail. As we prepared for the arrival of our baby, we held on to these lessons. The baby shower, though marred by terror, had also revealed the strength within us and the importance of community support. We had survived the nightmare, uncovered truths, and ensured that justice would be served. And most importantly, we had each other, a bond strengthened by fear, love, and the determination to protect the family we had created. So, to anyone watching this story, remember this. Life is unpredictable, and people are capable of actions we might never expect. But even in those moments of fear and chaos, your loved ones, your courage, and your resolve are your greatest protection. Stand strong, trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to fight for your safety and the safety of those you love. And if this story moved you, shocked you, or even made your heart race for us, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Share the story so others can learn, prepare, and protect themselves. Because in a world full of unpredictability, awareness and unity are more important than ever. Remember, even in the darkest moments, you are never alone, and the strength to survive and thrive lies within you. If the story shocked you, made your heart race, or reminded you how unpredictable life can be, don't stay silent. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could save you or someone you love. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see where all of you are watching from and hear your thoughts. Share this video with friends, family, and neighbors because awareness is the first step toward safety. Talk to your loved ones about vigilance, protection, and standing together when danger arises. And remember, even in the darkest, most terrifying moments, courage, love, and community can make all the difference. Stay alert, stay safe, and never underestimate the strength within you and those around you.